Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and officially begin this webinar. And this is, you might call this a tribute to Dr. Preston, although he did die in 2008. But Michael D. Preston, Dr. Michael D. Preston, is the author of Hypnosis, Medicine of the Mind. It's quite considering he didn't have a big publicity or, thing going on for those days, he's quite well known in the industry. Like I said, even though he didn't have some of the big ways to get his name out in the community, but he was quite a remarkable gentleman that I was one of the people I was lucky to just stumble onto to accidentally find out about. And at the time he had his Institute of Medical Hypnosis, and it was in Arizona, in Phoenix, Arizona. And there was an organization there called the NBHHA. It was the National Board for Hypnotherapy and Hypnotic Anesthesiology, a mouthful. And he was affiliated with that group. Oh, there's Jose. Jose's joining us. So Dr. Preston would do, when they would do their annual conference in Phoenix every year, Dr. Preston would always present some training there. And then because he had his Institute of Medical Hypnotherapy, hello, Jose, he also would do a lot of training out of his institute. And he started that institute in 1966, because when he died actually he died October 27th. I had a little trouble finding out what date it was. I knew it was 2008 because I had written a tribute to him on Dr. Paul Durbin's, Chaplain Durbin's website, along with him and a lot of other people. Of course, now Durbin is gone too. But in October 27th, evidently, of 2008 is when he died. He was 90 years old. So from 1966, he had that institute. Shortly after I left California, about 19 years ago, that institute, the National Board for Hypnotherapy and Hypnotic Anesthesiology had no longer was in existence because Sean Longacre, who started that group, had died, and his wife and some other people tried to keep it going. They weren't able to do it. So a lot of the places where I started learning medical hypnotherapy, immune system hypnotherapy, addictions hypnotherapy, and a whole bunch of others, too many that I can name, everything that they offered, I would take the trip from Los Angeles, where I was living at the time, and I would drive over to Phoenix. First of all, it was a beautiful drive. And second of all, that was the only place teaching anything having to do with the medical side of hypnosis. At the time, I had become best friends with my ex-husband who had lymphoma. And I literally went the first time with him because he heard that they worked with medical issues and cancer. And Dr. Preston, one of his specialties was working with cancer patients. And so when I went with my ex-husband to Arizona the first time, I just absolutely fell in love with it, and Preston and the whole group there. So we would spend usually a specialty with him would be 16 days, something like that in a row. And I would go there and just get little specialty trainings, and they were all just absolutely phenomenal. So Preston had a unique style. He was quite confident. He was quite upfront and direct. And to the point where some people, he was a little off-putting for some people. I still remember, and some of you might have heard this story if you've been in class with me, but I still remember one of the first trainings that I took with him, and it was a room full of people. They usually did it at hotels. And it was, there had to be 30 or 35 people in the room. And there was a gentleman who had walked in with his glasses down on his nose and had an attitude. He was a doctor. He was a medical doctor who was there to take this training from Preston. And he would interrupt him. That first day, I remember he interrupted him a few times. And it wasn't to ask a question. It was more to kind of show the group his expertise and how smart he was. That was getting everybody annoyed. And at one point, after a few times of him interrupting, Preston just bellowed at him, and he yelled, he says, "You," and he points at him, and he says, "You leave outside the door. When you come in here, leave outside the door what you think you know." And that was the last we heard from him during those trainings. He stayed very quiet after that. And of course, we're all in our heads doing a little quiet applause for Dr. Preston because he was becoming annoying to all of us. And that's the thing, and those of you that have trained with me, you know that my whole thing, And I teach it so I remind myself as well, because we all tend to get like, I know the best way to do this, and I think I know the best technique for that, and and I've trained with this person or that person. But in reality, if you're going to learn, you got to kind of put all that stuff kind of off to the side and let your mind open up to some new information, even if on first hearing about it, you have an opinion that might block it. Because remember, hypnosis isn't for the logical conscious mind. And every time I have presented, I've always, until last year, we always did live trainings, of course, for my hypnosis students. And because I studied so much with Preston, and he wasn't, in the hypnosis world, I didn't see anybody else teaching what he had taught me. So I brought in a lot of the things, and the library technique I would teach my students in the hypnosis training, and I still do. Matter of fact, we're doing it. I'll talk about that later, because it'll be open to if anybody else wants to join with us, because it's online now. But anyway, I would teach it, and I did a scripted out, condensed version of his library technique, and I do mean condensed. So every time I presented it, almost without exception, after the people would practice it, they would come out and we'd be getting feedback. And the comment I heard the most was, "That is so long." Now, that was always from the person that was the hypnotist in the first round, right? Because you're reading it with your conscious mind, even though we do, once we do this for a while, we kind of go into it with our clients, hopefully, because that opens up our creative mind. But it does seem to be long, and the language of it can really be missed on first browsing. And without exception, everyone who was the practice client, when we got their feedback, said it was the most amazing thing they'd ever experienced, of course. So when you're looking at or reading about scripts or reading scripts or anything like that, or even cold reading in classes for the first time as the hypnotist, just remember that it's your logical mind that's sitting there critiquing, because that's what your logical mind does. And that's not a bad thing, except when it comes to hypnotic language, because it's not designed for that, right? So some of the really unique language styles that Preston taught is why I still teach that library technique in my training, because the cadence and the repetition, almost to the point of ridiculousness in the library. There's one sentence that when I do the longer trainings, we don't have time for here, there's one sentence in the library technique that I intentionally leave in my training script that I use for the class. And in one sentence, I think I counted 14 times that he repeated the word chalkboard. I think it was like 14. It was some ridiculous number of times, and your logical mind would go, really? How many times are you going to say that word in this sentence, And that's just one sentence out of the script, right? And he would do that. And the interesting thing is, he would talk about how every time you say something, remember, we always talk about in my classes, I know, and most of you in other classes you take, I'm sure, because one of the main premises of hypnosis is what you focus on amplifies, right? So his idea about repeating things like that was, the more the person focused on it as he's taken them through a hypnotic process, the more real that chalkboard, in this case, would become for the person, right? So he repeated things a lot. And sometimes I remember he would tell us, repeat the same idea that you want to present to the student or to the client, if you're working, with a client. Repeat the same thing as many different ways as you can, with the key words emphasized each time. So he knew that would keep developing, number one, developing their imagination. If you're talking about noticing a chalkboard and you keep mentioning it over and over and over again, that chalkboard becomes more and more real. Plus, it's expanding their creative imagination. And we know that just helps them with the hypnotic process. So there were things like that. Now, when he would do an induction, he always included, as he was doing a hypnotic induction, phrases that were designed to precondition, he would say, precondition the client for re-hypnotizing them, right? And we all know about fractionation and how you can, post-hypnotic suggestions and all these things. But he would already be teaching them self-hypnosis and preconditioning them to let the next time that they go into hypnosis be even easier, quicker, faster, deeper, whatever words he would use. And he would include that in the very first induction with his clients. Now, Dr. Preston basically used a variation of his library technique, which was his signature technique, with every single client. Everything, like I said in the write-up, from smoking cessation, sports performance, study habits, depression, cancer, headaches, whatever the issue was, whether it was a habit, an emotional condition, or if it was a catastrophic illness, he still used variations of his library technique. And in this book, Hypnosis, Medicine of the Mind, there are a lot of scripted out things that he has in there for a lot of different things. Now, I'm trying to remember if somebody on this class had told me they had bought that book. And I know Suzanne's one of them, one of the ones that you both have it as well. Yeah, good. And that's why I talk about him a lot. I don't know if you were familiar with him before you took my class, but I want to introduce people who aren't familiar with him, with his particular style, because I do, not that you'll do or that I do everything like him, but I know my first recordings that I did were very much in the style, the progressive relaxation on those he was in my head, I always say, because I sounded, when I listened to him, it's like, oh, that sounds like Dr. Preston's language patterns, because I was studying with him so much. It wasn't necessarily intentional, and I didn't write out his script or anything, but it was just in my head. And I think that's a good thing. And hopefully a lot of the good parts of that still are there and evolving and changing. So Judy and Ivana, since you've had a little experience with the book you've written, have either of you studied with Preston? Or I know now I'm told that there's old videos of his on YouTube. I haven't watched any of them, but yeah. Anything that you have gotten from the book so far, either of you, that was significant or that stands out to you that you'd like to share?
Well, I used his library technique. I didn't know about it before you talked about it in class, and during class I ordered the book, and it is just, like you said, you just use it for everything. And I use it on every one of my clients, and it's a game changer every
Very
time.
nice. Very nice. Very nice. How about you, Ivana? Anything?
Yeah, pretty much what Judy said. I literally sometimes would just open up the book and read directly from it. If I hadn't picked it up in a while, I would just read directly from it, and it was very successful. And sometimes I would improvise of what I remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a pretty good technique. Definitely.
Yeah. And the thing about the library technique, and by the way, there's a lot of things called library techniques out there, because the library is a metaphor, obviously. And a lot of people have, thought about, I can use the idea of a library as a metaphor. So there's a lot of scripts out there on the internet, but Preston is the one who really developed that technique and made it into a teachable, process. It definitely is his signature technique. So the really cool thing about it, and the reason I think it is so useful and flexible, is because it includes all of the main principles that in my opinion, need to be in every good hypnotic process. It has regression built right in. It's very adaptable if you wanted to use it strictly as a regression technique. It's already embedded in there, the starting point for that. And it's introducing ideas like that in a way that opens up the client or the student's mind to some new ideas from maybe a little bit of a different frame from the way they'd been thinking about whatever their issue or their problem or their disease or condition is. And so there's dissociation in there. There's confusion techniques that I absolutely love. He has a variation of, when I talked about the chalkboard, the first session with his clients, he would take them to a classroom, and he would have them writing and erasing letters on a chalkboard. He called it a blackboard. I kind of trained myself out of saying blackboard. That's what they had when I was in school. That's how old I am. But a chalkboard with chalk, most people have some reference for, and some chalkboards are green. A lot of them are green. And nowadays people say, well, just use a whiteboard. Let's update it. But there's a different viscosity. There's a different tactile thing and smell for chalk. And when you're writing with chalk, it's a whole different experience than writing with a dry erase marker or something like that. So yes, you can use all those things, and whatever works, great. Use it and it works. That's what counts. And I still like to teach the library technique with the old fashioned. And what I do with clients that are like my age or older, which are getting fewer all the time, until I just had a birthday. What I like to do is I have evolved the classroom on that first session, and I use it sometimes without the library technique. It's a good deepening technique to use in any hypnotic process. But the way that I like to use that is I actually, and it kind of came out naturally one time, because I do remember writing on a chalkboard as a child in my little school room. So I would bring up, imagine as if you're a small child again and you just learned your ABCs. So I actually turn the classroom into a little mini regression, because when people get childlike, they get more creative, don't they? If they go into their little child's mind that was just learning their ABCs, and in the case, the way I do it, I say, you're just so proud of yourself because you just learned your ABCs. And then you can work all kinds of little regression and confusion techniques, and developing, like he said, developing their imagination by saying things like, and you may even remember back when you first started learning your ABCs, it seemed like it was so challenging maybe, or it was going to be like, how would you ever learn all of these letters, and you can turn it into a whole experience right there. And then, but then by doing it that way, like I said, with people that I know are old enough to remember chalkboards, I'll have them then, go back to that age when they first learned. They know that now that they know their ABCs and they're so proud of themselves, they're going to show how well they learned them. So they're going to pick up the piece of chalk and the eraser. And I don't say what kind of eraser, because there's different kinds. My old classroom had that big floppy thing. It looked like a puppet. It was like a big floppy thing. It looked like a mop rag or something. I don't know. So there's different kinds. But it's just like in the library, there's certain elements. Like I said, we won't have time to go through everything here, but the elements that he brings in, one of the things in the library, which is the therapeutic part of the process, is there's a container in the library where they're going to start discarding things. And in the library, there's books that are on the problem side that are considered problems. They're part of the presenting issue, if you will. And the first thing that he does, like I said, in all hypnotic techniques, there's stuff they got to shift or change or get rid of, fears, doubts, limiting beliefs, those kind of things, that kind of got to get shaken up or gotten rid of before you can change enough to start accessing strengths and making the different choices and changes, adding things. So it's like I always talk about the vessel. If it's already full, you can't add something to it. So it's always a little bit of emptying out in each session so that there's room now to fill that space, so to speak, with some resources and some new things, some new ideas maybe. So the container that ends up being what all of the things that they're getting rid of goes into. He says very strictly, don't give it a name. Don't call it a trash can. Don't call it a recycle can. Don't call it anything. Just call it a container and let them figure it out. And I remembered when he told us this in the trainings I took with him, he said people will come up with the most creative, variations of that container. And at the end of the session, whenever I would use the library technique with my clients, he was absolutely right. And sometimes it would be a recycle bin. They said, yeah, mine was a recycle bin. I was just shredding things, or a shredder, one of them was. That's not a recycle, but one was a recycle bin. One was a shredder. One person had it. It was like even though it was in the library, it was a big dump truck. So I don't know, the mind can do anything. So it just put a big dump truck, like a trash truck, and it would lift it up and put it into the back of the truck. It's like, okay, big library, I guess. So people will create on their own. And Preston always thought it's better to let their imagination come up with these things, right? Those kind of details. And a lot of the things about the library technique, like I said, it's about emptying out and get rid of stuff they don't need. And the first book in the library he would have them get rid of would be literally a book with the title of their problem. So if they were smokers, the first book would be The Smoking Problem, he would call it when it was on the shelf. And if they had cancer, literally the first book they pull off the shelf is The Cancer Problem, or it might be The Migraine Problem. So this is one of the exceptions for me of the idea that most of the time, and like I said, everything has exceptions, right? Most of the time when I'm doing hypnosis with people, once I get them into the induction and going into the therapeutic part, so you've probably done an induction and a deepener. By the time I get them into the therapeutic part of the process, my general tendency, or the way that I do work with clients, is that I'm not going to talk about the problem anymore. You won't hear me say the word pain or cancer. And the only exception where it does come up a little bit in the process is for smokers, because it's just, smokers are just a little different. If you ever study with me, my smoking program, it's just a little different. But my preference is, and the reason, by the way, for that, does anyone know why, once I get them to the therapeutic part, I won't say the word cancer or pain or migraines or whatever it is? Does anyone have an idea why I prefer not to do that once they're deep in hypnosis and we're doing therapeutic hypnosis? Anybody
You should
know?
still be hypnotizing them with those words either way. So you might as well just hypnotize them with the solutions as opposed to the problems, because they're already so
Good.
focused on the problem anyway, all day long.
Very good. Yeah, exactly. And because, yeah, absolutely. You don't want to bring that back, because once they're into hypnosis, with most things, like I said, smoking is a little different, so we're not talking about that. But with most things, especially if it's physical, because some of you have been in my medical hypnosis training, the cause, the root cause, the initial sensitizing event, or whatever you're calling the thing that led up to this current issue, which is either cancer or migraines or a physical thing, or maybe a mental depression or anxiety, the thing behind it, most likely, a lot of time isn't going to be about the symptom. So if you're calling cancer the symptom, the thing that you're actually dealing with making changes about are usually things that happened many years before the cancer even showed up. That kind of set the stage, so to speak, emotionally, mentally, on different levels, that when there was the opportunity in the body to succumb to cancer, that it gave into it, as opposed to the next person who had stronger immune system and different ideas and beliefs and all those things, right? So the idea is that the presenting issue many times when we're doing a hypnotic process, my belief system says, because it ends up being something that logically may not be related directly to the presenting issue. And Preston was right along with that. I have one little thing, if it'll let me, I'm going to share just a little quick piece here, just to give you a flavor of how he thinks about things. Can everyone see that? This is from an article. If anybody wants this article, I'll be happy to send it to you. It's just a little short write-up that he did on fibromyalgia, treatment for fibromyalgia. And he said it's a chronic syndrome marked by debilitating fatigue, muscular pain, and tenderness in certain parts of the body. Fibro meaning fiber, myalgia meaning pain. So we have pain in the fibers. And he says the cause of this pain and debilitating fatigue is that the nerves in the area of the muscles are sending unwanted messages to the area causing the pain. In the next paragraph, pain is nothing more than a message from one part of the body alerting the brain that there is a problem that must be taken care of. You know, we talk about pain as a signal. Talk about that in the medical hypnosis all the time. And he says, going on, there is no cell in your body that is pain, discomfort, or disturbance. With the proper use, with the use of proper hypnotherapeutic suggestions while in a state of hypnosis, all symptoms and emotions can be modified, altered, or removed. So once that pain signal, and this is talking about fibromyalgia, but you could apply this to any kind of pain, obviously. Once that signal is being taken care of, like he says, pain is a response to a signal. And once it's being taken care of with hypnosis suggestions, we can change the experience and the response inside of the body to that signal, even if the signal is still yelling out that it needs attention. So, and we could get, there's a lot of nuances about all of this, but just to give you an idea of, he's very direct. He doesn't equivocate when he's making statements, and he feels very strongly about these things. I have another article on cancer that I think those of you that have been in my medical hypnotherapy training, you may already have this article that I have on Michael Preston talking about cancer cells. And to me, he words things, he explains things in a way that even if you're not trained in medicine, which when I first met him, obviously I had none of that, and I had not a whole lot of hypnotherapy training yet either. He makes it understandable, and he makes it logical, so that even your logical part of your conscious mind is going, that makes sense. And because of his conviction in his beliefs that he held, and based on decades and decades of him helping people with these kinds of problems, he had conviction and confidence. He would help other people to believe it too. And we know, based on placebo studies and a lot of different things, now that we can measure all these things so much better than we could decades ago, we know that belief and expectation can really be a big part of what helps us to help our clients. I think everyone on this call is a trained hypnotist. If not, if any of you aren't, then just know that you can change how you think about something, and it literally changes how your body experiences it. And this isn't just wishful thinking or, just anecdotal. This is something they can now prove on the imaging machines we have and how the brain processes information and all of these things. So it is a very powerful tool. Like he says, hypnosis is medicine of the mind. That's the title of his book, Medicine of the Mind. Because the chemicals, and I had a doctor as a client one time that was coming to me for weight issues. And when I work with people, all the labels come off, and I kind of don't think about things that aren't relevant to what I'm doing with the client. So I'd sort of forgotten he was a doctor, frankly. It wasn't relevant to what I was working with him on. And at one point in one of our sessions, we were talking about how the chemicals in the brain, affect the way the body feels and responds and things. And he said, he said, the brain has chemicals that are 10,000 times more powerful than the most powerful pain medication or morphine or anything else or Valium that man ever created. 10,000 times stronger, and no bad side effects. So, the medicine chest in your mind, that metaphor, the medicine in the mind, isn't just a metaphor, it's a fact. And the doctors know this, that we have amazing pain relieving chemicals that can be encouraged to be released with our thoughts. And the metaphorical thoughts for pain and for releasing chemicals. Now, when it comes to cancer treatment, we know from the Simonton studies in the 1970s that the mind was able to release some kind of aggression on the cancerous tumors with those patients in those studies, to the point where they were shrinking the cancerous tumors with the power of thought. And it wasn't anecdotal again. It was doctors doing these studies, and it was documented in the medical literature. It had to be, because it was proven. So again, then it's like, well, how hard is it to get your mind to think the right thoughts? How do you know what the right thoughts are? Well, that's kind of the big question, isn't it? And Dr. Preston, I think, is one of the people that for decades offered some amazing answers. Now, I have another article he wrote on anti-aging, staying young, staying youthful, using hypnosis, right? And I mentioned to many people in my classes that one of the first trainings I did with him, he convinced everybody, including me in the room, that there's absolutely no reason that every human being should be able to live to at least 126, very healthy and no problem at all. That should be something that everybody can do. And obviously we know not everybody's doing that. not many people are living over 100, but more than used to, right? So, but he was convinced of that. And some of his techniques are about talking to the cells in your body and getting your body to heal quicker than it would normally, because the tendency is always that the body is going to send resources to an injured area to work to heal it. But he speculated and kind of proved with a lot of the different things he did that you can speed up and accelerate and enhance that process. And again, he wasn't the only one studying these things. He was one of the people, though, that was out there teaching it to the hypnosis community. So he would talk to his cells every night before he'd go to sleep, and he would tell his cells to reproduce to the new cells that are being created in the body, because they're always dying off and new ones are being created. And he has the whole in that article. He also talks about that we're a whole new person, I forget how many years it is now, but there's certain parts of our body that recreate very quickly. Some that takes weeks or months, but the entire body is all new cells after a few years, very few years. So, if you think about that, why would we ever age? So there's a lot about the mind in aging, in that process of aging. So he would tell his cells to reproduce the new cells and to educate them to be as youthful and active as when he was 20. Just like the cells that were being created in his body when he was 20, because he had a belief that said, my mind and body know what that was like. It knows how to create those kinds of cells. And he was convinced that he could do that. Now, he did live till 90, and he was sick the last 6 years of his life because he had had some problems. I think he had fallen off a ladder again. He kept falling off ladders for some reason. At one point, I said, you need to stay off ladders. But he had some health issues those last 6 years. But, he had a great attitude, and he was quite youthful mentally up until the very end. So the library technique, again, we don't have time to go through the whole thing here, but it's all about taking metaphorical problem books off the shelf and tearing them up, throwing them into the container. And after all the problems are torn up and thrown in the container, and he always has a problem that's called fear. He always includes a fear problem book. And he always included one other one, the I can't problem book. So no matter what the issue was, and then he would fill in other books with other things. But there's a lot of variation. There's a lot of room for developing different ways of doing this. And then after they get rid of those, then there's a way he does it where he has it go, the container goes to the cellar and throws itself into a fiery furnace, and all of those problems are burnt, to ashes. So getting rid of them completely. And there's different ways you can do that. I've had different variations of that I've come up with through the years as well. And I had one lady in a group one time that said, well, I don't want all that smoke going up the chimney and polluting the environment. I said, well, you know what? Your chimney has a magical process by which that dust and soot is turning into life-giving energy in the universe, and it's helping the plants to grow. And I don't know, we did something with it. So your mind can either make it good or bad, right? One way or the other. But he would do the fiery furnace. And then now that they've, again, emptied out, right? Now the next step usually in a hypnotic process, now there's some room. Now you got to fill that space with something. So then on the other side, which was the right side of the aisle in the library, there would be little wrapped up packages. And they would be special books that the people unwrap now. And one would be success. I think one was happiness. You can make them anything, different things. And they would unwrap those books and put them on the shelves, along with all of the happy memories, which is set up at the beginning of the process, where the right side has every positive, happy, healthy experience they ever had in their entire life, right? And so now they've got these new things that have been added. And then they have a place where they go, where there's a comfortable recliner in the library, and they go and sit down in the recliner. And now this is what he calls recreating themselves. Now that they've done what they've done, and he has a whole great little speech he gives the person at this point about how when you get rid of something And he starts bringing in metaphorical and anecdotal things to help the mind and body assimilate what just happened, and to kind of cement in that those things are gone forever. They're not going to come back. And he makes comments like, if you have a problem tooth in your history, because most people have had that, once the dentist removes the tooth and throws it away, that tooth can never bother you again, right? And he talks about a couple of other things like that. And so he's really cementing in that those things are gone forever. And then he has the person recreate themselves as the person they can be now that they did what they did, and they can make themselves into anything they want. Who are they? What do they do? Where do they go? What do they do with their life? And he has a whole process he does so it's almost like a hypnosis chair in the library that he's hypnotizing them now to create this new person that they can be now that they've done what they've done. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful process. Are there any questions so far? I know I'm skipping around and just hitting on some highlights of it. Yeah, Ivana?
Yeah, would you use something like this for memory loss or memory focus concentration type of a thing?
I tend to think this could be adapted for just about anything. So with a very little bit of thinking, because the first book would be called what? The Memory Problem. That's the problem. And like I said, this is one of the few processes where it's right there. And that's the first one that they get rid of, the memory problem. And again, the principles are all the same. There may be other things based around it, and the other books that are on the problem side are going to be things they bring up, like guilt, fear, shame, regret. Those are the kind of emotions that weaken us, remember, right? Fear and shame and regret and all those things. Those make us weaker. And when we are in a depressed or a sad or a shameful or a regret, those are the kind of things that literally weaken our immune system. So the physical body also gets weaker. Emotionally, we're weaker, and physically, we're weaker. So those are the things we would also get rid of from the problem side. Now, when I do this, usually I will, after I've gotten rid of all the ones that I came up with in the pre-talk that I think we need to get rid of, I will usually, and I started doing this a few years into it because I thought, what if we didn't talk about something, or maybe they don't even know there's something else, So I usually have them search for one last problem book on the problem side. And this one, I say, has everything else that your unconscious mind understands has been a part of this problem. In this case, memory problem, right? Anything else associated with it, because I don't want to leave a chance that we forgot something or that they didn't think of something or that they don't even know it's there. So that to me is just kind of cleaning out that whole side having to do with that memory problem. And then on the other side, of course, success is always a good one for no matter what you're working with. That's what he would include, success and happiness. Because once a problem is gone, people feel successful and they feel happier. So those are generic. And then you can add things on that side like, I don't know, my brain said improved memory, but it sounded a little corny to make that a book, but why would you not? And you realize now that this new book is up there, that your memory is improving every day. That there are new things that your mind is doing to help to remind you of things or something. And why not? I don't know. I would say yes, you could use it, for that. Because again, if somebody has poor memory that's been getting worse, they do feel some shame. They're going to feel a little bit of guilt, probably. There's all kinds of other negative emotions attached. And one thing they need would be confidence, right? That it actually might be able to be better. And again, we can't, as hypnotherapists, we can't promise people that their memory is going to improve. But we do know, at the very least, if they feel better about themselves, and if they got rid of some of that heavy stuff they had been carrying around before they came in our door, we know at the very least, there's going to be less stress about remembering things. They're probably going to be better at it just with that alone. And then we can put in strategies for their mind to to come up with ways to access what is there, because we know it's still there. And we know from the Mankato nuns, if any of you were in the class where I talked about the nuns of Mankato, Minnesota, from the Life magazine article in 1990, what was it, 92 or 4 or something, that they had did a whole article, and these nuns had Alzheimer's, they had dementia, their brains were diseased, some of them quite profoundly diseased. But because they kept learning new things and using their mind, the mind uses the brain, right? It's not the brain that thinks. It's that other part of us that they can't find when they do the autopsy. It's like, where did that go? Yeah, well, there's the brain, there's the body. Where did the mind go? That's what really goes, right? Some people might call it spirit, but I think that's all part of that. Just depends on your particular frame of how you think of these things. But the mind accesses, it has everything stored. And if the brain is getting diseased, that's why when people say, can you help people with Alzheimer's or dementia? I believe you can. Now, I don't know if studies have been done on someone who's gone to the point where they can't pay attention and follow your directions to do hypnosis with them. But I think we all know that even just having someone caring with you when you have something happening can help you to heal faster, at the very least, right? So anyway, but yeah, memory improvement. I started working on mine a few years ago, and I know it's gotten a whole lot better, a whole lot better. I had a real problem when I started networking a lot and had my own business. I would notoriously get introduced to someone. I would turn around and then I'd immediately go, oh my gosh, what was their name? Like immediately, it would just go, it's gone. And it was embarrassing, And so I started coming up with some strategies, and I took the pressure off myself instead of, that you remember the rule of the mind where the more you try to force something, the more evasive it becomes. That's not the exact words, but that kind of an idea, right? It's a principle. It's a principle. So what I started doing was, if I couldn't think of something right away that I knew I should know, I would stop. I would take all the pressure off, and I use my, my little anchor that I use for everything, because that way I only got to remember one. So I empty out, open up, and I'd say, okay, it'll come to me in a second. I started saying that, and guess what started happening? It started coming almost instantly, because I just took the pressure off. I took the stress off of it. So when people have memory issues, they're going to be stressed about it, and that just makes the memory worse. Right. And then they beat up on themselves, and then they feel bad and all that other stuff. And I would venture to say that's true with any other thing, whether it's physical, mental, or emotional. Those are all elements. And self-esteem starts diminishing based on all these things as well. So I think the library technique is unique, is really one of those cool things that you could adapt to anything. And he even has one area where he talks about, what if people don't like libraries? Or what if they were in a library when their brother had a heart attack? And it's like, that's a bad memory. I mean, it might happen. Or they can't stand the smell of a library for some reason, And there's ways to get around that. But he even would say, you can put yourself somewhere else while we're talking about these things. So go hang out on the beach. So, even if that's a problem, he has, and he's still going to talk about the problem books and the container and all that stuff while they're hanging out at the beach. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird, but the mind knows how to do this stuff. And by the way, he would only do the classroom part with the writing and erasing the letters. He only would do that on the very first session with his, he called them patients. He would only do that the first session. And then because he preconditioned them, like I talked about earlier, the second session, when they come in, they can go directly to the library now. So like I said, that piece, that really neat piece of the classroom has some really nice deepening techniques in it, some nice confusion techniques. And there's a lot of flexibility in there that you can use it for a deepening technique. And I do include that, his version of that, in the hypnosis training when I teach that. Before we do run out of time, if nobody has a direct question about Preston or what we've been talking about right now, I just want to make sure I get it in. Like I said, I have articles that he wrote on cancer that some of you already have, anti-aging, hypnotherapy. Oh, he has one on AIDS, because they worked a lot with the AIDS community as well. So autoimmune disease type things. And fibromyalgia, there's one on that. And I already showed you that. That was a very short article. That was just a little two paragraph article. But on October 30th, I will be presenting in my hypnosis certification training, the module that we're going to be doing on the 20th, which is a Saturday from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern United States time. I'm going to be presenting the expanded version along with great handouts. I have presented this at the IACT and IMDHA before, and I think they even have a video that I ran across. I didn't realize they were selling videos of me, but I guess they've got one of me from many years ago where I presented it. But I think it was one of those 50-minute ones. But we're going to be presenting it, and then there will be scripts, articles, and like I said, a whole scripted version in the handout that I give. And we will be doing practicing it, because you got experience. There's nothing like experiencing it. And when you hear his language patterns in hypnosis, I think it's quite a unique experience that everyone, hopefully, that ever trains with me will be able to have. And it's quite unique and different. Like I said, it's not designed for the logical mind. It's designed for you to hear in hypnosis. And it's powerful stuff. It's very powerful. So, any questions?
Betty, can you repeat the dates for that? October the 20th, that's today, that's the webinar. And then on the 30th, you're doing the library technique, the full
on the 30th
version?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be the way that I teach it in my hypnosis training, because that's part of the hypnosis training.
Mm-hmm.
Like you guys, a couple of you have been on those, because you get CEUs if you want to do it. If you want to do that, you can go to my website and sign up for that class. And then you'll get the really expanded handout that has the whole scripted all the way through from the classroom through the library technique. Okay, and it's a generic, we'll be doing it generically during the class. But, if you have, the person has a problem that's being practiced with, of course, that would go on the title of the first book that gets removed.
On October 30th is you talk about it, and it's the practice day as well.
Yeah.
It's both. Okay.
Yeah, because it's 5 hours. Yeah. It's a 5-hour day. And actually, we may end up doing part of it on another day, because it's so long that to do one whole practice session takes quite a while. Takes a little bit of time. Yeah. And as you know, this is also these free webinars that are usually the third Wednesday every month. On different topics are also a chapter meeting of IACT and HEA, Hypnosis Education Association, and International Association of Counselors and Therapists. And you can get 1 hour of CEUs for taking these free webinars also. If you miss any or part of it or all of it, and I have your name, I can always tell you how to access it on YouTube once I edit it down. Michael Preston. There's a lot about him out there. I encourage you to look into it. Like I said, I want to share the legacy of what amazing gifts he gave me. Just as one weird little last thing I will share with you that might sound strange, but when I reconnected with him after I moved to Florida, and I thought he probably was already dead, frankly, because he was pretty old when I worked with him. And then when the organizations where I trained were gone, I never heard of him again. And when I came to Florida, I found someone who knew him, and I reconnected with him, luckily, because somebody had borrowed his book that he signed for me, and it was gone. And so he sent me another book and signed it. And then he died like really not too many months after that. But I have a recording he sent me, a personalized recording. I've got a voicemail that I won't erase that he called me one time. But after he died, he kept inviting me. He said, call me anytime, talk. And when he'd get on the phone, he'd talk for an hour with you. He was so generous. And I got busy for a couple of months, 2 or 3 months, and I hadn't called him. And then I heard he passed away. And I started doing what a lot of us do. I started beating myself up and just feeling so bad that I didn't take advantage of the opportunity after all that time of not being around him. And I finally had the door open to me, and I hadn't been calling him. And I was just feeling all this horrible regret and stuff. And he literally woke me up in the middle of the night with his voice screaming in my ear. And God, it was him. It was his voice. You know, I'm not going to interpret what it was, but it was real. And he woke me up and he said, stop it, stop it, stop it. He said it 3 times. And then he said, regret's a waste of time. Get out there and do what I taught you. And that was the end of it.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That was the message. And boy, let me tell you, when he yells at you, you listen. And I was half asleep, of course, and my creative imagination brought me his voice saying that. And I let it go. And I did. And I started presenting the library technique everywhere I could find for people to listen. And I'm glad I did, because now a lot of people know about him and this amazing technique. So there you go. And, you know, people try to interpret what that was. I don't care. It was him in my ear. That's all I know. I loved it. And he did me a big favor, because I was really beating myself up. So think about that when you're beating yourself up about something, because you know what? Regret is a waste of time. And, you know, I just turned 70. You know, time, who knows how much time we got to enjoy all of the possibilities that are in this lifetime. So enjoy, spread the good word, keep doing the good work all of you are doing. I love seeing all of you and your smiley faces. And I'm so glad you guys are getting together on the side and staying in touch with each other and all that. Jose, it was really nice to see you. Kate, I didn't get to see, so I don't know if I know Kate or not. I don't see a last name. Sarah, I haven't seen in a long time. Where'd she say she is? In Maine?
Yeah, I moved, I retired. I turned 70 as well, and I retired here.
Cool. When's your birthday?
March 17th.
Ah, okay. So you're just a tiny bit ahead of me there. I tell you, it feels really good. It feels young. I never dreamed 70 would feel this great. So, you know, now I got to start preparing for 80. So when I turn 80, I'll be able to say that same thing. Gosh, this isn't bad at all. Because I got a lot to do. I got a lot of books to finish. So I better live. Well, you know, y'all know, because of Dr. Preston, I tell my students I'm up to 195 now. I finally did add three more years this past few months. I think it was during you guys' class, the medical hypnosis. I found something else I had to study that was going to take a couple years. So I had been at 192 for, gosh, 5 years or longer. So now it's up to 195. So enjoy, all of you. Hope to see you all soon. Uphypnosis.com has all the classes. If you see anything interesting, I'd love to see you all again. And the free webinar every month.
Thank you,
Next month will be
Patty.
nice. Thank you all.